And let's start off with our stock image right here. In order to get her head to break apart and have the pieces float and scatter over the back of the photo over here, what we must do is cut out her head and place it on a new layer, and then start cutting out pieces on her head and then dragging those pieces over the photo, sort of over here in this direction. So you sort of have to visualize and have a plan in place, or at least a vision on what you're going to create. You can go in there and start to experiment with things if you want and gather some inspiration or whatever, but it's good to have a plan in place. So let me go ahead and show you what I did here. All I did is I selected the lasso tool on the toolbar, and then I just selected her head here, and I want to make sure that I'm going just with her hair. If you have somebody that has hair, I'm just going to go right along the edge of her face and hair. And this doesn't have to be perfect. You just need to create a simple selection around her head with the lasso tool. I'll come up here to edit, copy, and then I'll go over here to edit and paste. And so now we have this on its own layer. Look at that. And I'll just go in here and name these really quick. I can just call this head cutout and stock. Whoops. Sometimes if you double click a little bit too fast there, if you're not directly on the name, it will open up the layer styles dialog. So I'm just going to double click on the name here, and we'll just call this is the original stock image. So I'll just call this stock image. Also, I'm going to want to make a duplicate of this head cutout image here, because we're going to sort of create this guide for us to help us in determining where we want these little pieces that we're going to be pulling apart from this woman's face here. So let's just go ahead and make a duplicate of this layer, and I'm going to name this stretch, because we are going to stretch this image. And then I'll drag this below the head cutout. Okay, next I'm going to go ahead and just make this stock image layer invisible and make this background invisible so we can see the background here. Now what we must create is sort of like a guide, so we know how far to pull the pieces from this image, the distance and things like that. So what we're going to do is on the stretch layer right here, I'm going to come up here to edit and free transform, and I'm going to pull this out. I'm just going to stretch this just about like this. So you need to stretch the image as far as you want the pieces that are breaking apart from the head. Okay, and I'll show you. Let's see, I'll go ahead and just press the enter key on the keyboard, and then what I'll do is lower the opacity of this down just a little bit, something like this. And I can even turn the background layer on here so we can see the detail in that a little bit. And then I'll click on the head cutout layer right here. See, if I didn't have this stretch layer and we started to come in here on the head cutout layer and started breaking pieces apart, well, you could break all the way to this point right here, but you might have all the pieces over here, and then you're going to just have this big gap because you've pulled all the pieces off this side of her head here. Well, we don't want that gap there. We want it to be very gradual. So when I started this, I had to think like, what am I going to do so I will know how far to go when I cut these pieces out. See, do I go way over here or do I go right here? Because you want it all to sort of blend and have the space in between each part. You want it to be nice and even. And it's not going to be perfect. You can always go back and, fill the spaces in later on. Okay, so it's not going to be perfect, but that's why I wanted to create this stretch right here. That way we can see, okay, I've stretched this, so what I can do is pull a piece out and take it to just right about there, and then I can take another piece and pull it out and another piece. So yes, I did every single piece. I cut it out this way. And it was a very therapeutic type of process. But it really creates one of those, how did you do that type images. But you can see if I keep doing this and using this stretch layer here in the background as a guide, I'm much better off having everything fit evenly later on. And let me show you how I do this. I hold down the Control key, which is the Command key on the Mac, and I make a selection. And let me go ahead and just zoom in here a little bit closer so we can see this. But I'll select the lasso, and then I'll draw a selection, just a random crooked, it doesn't have to be a perfectly round circle. You almost don't want it to be because it needs to look like it's jagged and it looks like it's breaking apart. So I'll hold down that Control key and click in the middle of that selection. You'll see the little icon here, little cursor change to a black arrow with a little scissors icon on it. And then if you click in the middle there, you can pull out a piece. Well, you'll want to try to place this piece in the exact same spot where you cut it out from. Okay, you see what I'm getting at here? So if you do it this way the whole time, there's going to be a better chance everything's going to fit in evenly when you get all done with this. So I'll just come in here and start pulling the pieces off. And I notice the closer you get, then you end up making smaller pieces. And again, you can go back and fill these in later on. But this is all you do. I mean, you sit here, it took me like, a couple hours, but it was really cool. It was a lot of fun. I'm getting a little sloppy here. You can also cut other pieces off like this. If you find your pieces are a little bit too perfect, then you can cut them apart. Try to avoid any type of straight edges, because that just doesn't look very real. And just you get to cut those up with a lasso tool, something like that. And this is the whole process. Whoops, let me go ahead and, there we go. And you continue this until you get very close to her face. By the time you get to her hairline over here, you really have to plan ahead. You have to know where you're going to stop. So we don't want to start breaking her eye apart and her mouth. So what you can do is make sort of like a guide so you know when to stop. So you could just paint something. I could make a new layer and choose black. And this is just a little thing here so you can see what I'm talking about here. But you can plan ahead where you want to stop. So let's see if I want to make something that looks like this. Whoops, there we go. Now I'll just come in here and I'll just around the cheek a little bit and over the eye and then over here and then somewhere over here. And you can keep this on a layer here and call it guide. Face guide or something like that. I'm not really good with names, so I just whatever comes to my mind. But this will help you so you know where to stop when you're breaking apart your image with the lasso tool. Okay?